Difficult. It's a challenge.
John DeVries' lawn has become the focus of his days lately. He says feral hogs keep targeting his home and others in the Hidden Glen neighborhood of Round Rock.
I think Sunday night was time number 6.
The hogs are hungry. Dry conditions have forced them to find food in new places. DeVries snapped these photos of the damage the hogs recently left behind while scouring for food.
And they're looking for nuts, grubs, roots.
Manicured lawns are a buffet for them.
Wildlife officers in the Texas Hill Country are used to finding dead hogs. What they came across on a spring morning in March 2021 was different enough that nobody in the department had a ready explanation. Spread across more than 200 acres of brushland, packed into a stretch barely 3 kilometers wide, lay 17 carcasses. Not 2 or 3 stragglers picked off by drought or disease. 17, all close together, all fresh. And it wasn't the fact that they were dead that stopped the wardens in their tracks. It was how they had died. Every animal had been fed on in almost exactly the same place, the neck and the top of the shoulder, then left untouched right where it fell. Nothing dragged into brush cover, nothing buried, no wire, no leg hold traps, no spent shell casings, not even a boot print from someone checking a kill. Whatever did this simply walked away and never came back to finish the meal. The wardens searched the churned up ground for sign, expecting the usual list of suspects. No black bear tracks, no cougar prints. What they found instead were paw prints far too small to belong to anything capable, on paper, of bringing down an animal several times its own weight. They photographed the tracks and sent the images off to a wildlife lab for identification, and the answer that eventually came back left the whole team staring at their screens in silence. Before we get to what that lab report actually said, it helps to understand just how massive the crisis those 17 carcasses were only a tiny fragment of. As of 2024, the U.S. Department of Agriculture puts the national feral hog population at roughly 6.9 million animals, more than the number of people living in Los Angeles. Unlike the residents of Los Angeles, though, these animals refuse to stay put. Texas alone carries an estimated 2.6 million of them, close to the population of Chicago, and they now turn up in 99% of the state's 254 counties. There is almost no stretch of Texas left that hasn't seen a hoof print. But head count isn't even the scariest number here. It's the reproduction rate. A single sow can throw 2 litters a year, up to 12 piglets each time, which means that if hunters and trappers wiped out 70% of a local population in a single season, the surviving 30% could rebuild those numbers before the next season even started. Biologists sometimes describe it as a population with its own built-in repair kit, a self-restoring species that nothing else on this continent quite matches. And they aren't waiting around to be dealt with either. Over the last 20 years, feral hogs have pushed north out of the southern states faster than any wildlife model predicted, moving from forest into open pasture, from pasture into subdivisions, from subdivisions straight into city limits, tearing up golf greens, chewing through buried fiber optic lines, and wandering onto the runways of military airfields. News crews in Florida once filmed a 300-pound boar shoulder its way straight through a homeowner's patio door, refusing to retreat until it had gone after the family dog. This has stopped being a problem that only touches ranchers and farmers. Federal and state agencies have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into control programs involving traps, helicopters, tracking dogs, and chemical bait, and after all of that spending, the national population still shows no meaningful, lasting decline, which is exactly why 17 half-eaten carcasses in the hill country were enough to send researchers back to the drawing board. But before we get to the predator, it's worth correcting the picture most people carry around of the prey. Picture a feral hog, and most people imagine something slow, fat, and half-blind, rooting lazily through mud. That mental image will get you hurt. What actually roams the American countryside is the product of centuries of interbreeding between escaped domestic pigs and imported Eurasian wild boar, a cross nobody designed on purpose, but that natural selection has spent 500 years fine-tuning for pure survival. These animals can weigh up to 100 kilograms, carry tusks longer than 15 centimeters, and wear hide more than 2.5 centimeters thick over a dense pad of fat. dense enough that a light rifle round can glance off a vital organ the way a fist bounces off a brick wall. Experienced hunters across the South put it bluntly: if your shot placement isn't perfect, you're better off not shooting at all, because a wounded hog won't drop. It will turn and come straight at you. These animals can sprint at roughly 48 kilometers an hour, outrunning an Olympic sprinter at full stride, clear a 1-meter fence without slowing down, tear through a steel trash can like cardboard, and shoulder through a solid wooden door. And even that physical toolkit isn't the part that should worry you most. It's what's happening behind their eyes. Feral hogs don't just react to threats, they study them. Miss a shot at one animal and the entire group will never again let a human within range. Trap half a sounder and the survivors remember that exact spot and avoid it permanently. Researchers have documented entire groups shifting their feeding schedules and travel routes after a single bad encounter with people. That isn't blind instinct. That's learning. Their diet does nothing to slow them down either. Roots, grubs, bird eggs, turtles, whatever they can dig up, plus something far more unsettling: footage out of ranching country, including viral clips from regional Australia, shows sounders killing newborn calves, lambs, and kid goats outright. When easier food runs short, they'll eat carrion without hesitation, which turns every hog into a walking reservoir for whatever disease that dead animal happened to be carrying. The bill for all of this keeps climbing. The USDA now puts the yearly economic damage from feral hogs across the country at roughly $3 billion, with Texas alone responsible for more than $500 million of that, enough money to build 50 mid-sized hospitals. To make that abstract number feel real, one grower in Williamson County went to bed with 24 acres of corn ready for the combine and woke up to a flattened field, the work of a single sounder of about 30 hogs passing through overnight, a loss of roughly $40,000 in a matter of hours. Over in Brazos County, a different operation lost $60,000 not to trampled crops, but to rooting. Hogs dug so deep and so persistently that they collapsed the buried irrigation lines running under the property, and crop damage is only the visible layer. The deeper danger sits in the water. Feral hogs have no functional sweat glands, so they cool off by wallowing, and they defecate right where they wallow, in ponds, creeks, and the groundwater underneath. In parts of Alabama, bacterial contamination in streams running through hog territory has tested at 40 times the safe threshold. Each individual animal can be a carrier for more than 30 distinct pathogens. In Texas, roughly a third of tested hogs came back positive for brucellosis, which causes chronic fever and organ damage in people who contract it. Close to 1 in 5 tested positive for pseudorabies. Internal parasite loads run 10 to 15 times higher than in farm-raised pigs. The CDC has specifically warned that handling raw feral hog meat barehanded can lead to infections serious enough to require hospitalization, and sometimes the danger isn't even indirect. In 2019, a woman in Texas was killed in an attack right outside her own home. In 2023, a factory worker in China needed more than 100 stitches after being attacked in broad daylight. Given the scale of that damage, the obvious question comes up almost immediately. Why not just eat the problem away? 6.9 million animals causing billions in destruction sounds, on paper, like a supply chain waiting to happen. Europe already runs this playbook. Germany moves close to 40,000 tons of wild boar meat a year. Italian producers turn it into cured salami served in Michelin-starred kitchens, and in Japan, it shows up as a premium winter hot pot ingredient. So why hasn't the same thing taken off in the United States? 3 obstacles stand in the way, and they're each serious on their own. First, disease. American feral hogs live in uncontrolled, often filthy conditions, drinking contaminated water and scavenging carrion, and with roughly a third carrying brucellosis and nearly a fifth carrying pseudorabies, mishandling the meat is a genuine health risk. Second, the law. Federal regulations only permit commercial sale of meat that has passed through an officially inspected processing facility, and wild-caught hogs simply cannot be certified that way. You're free to hunt one and eat it yourself, but selling that meat is illegal, a strange legal gap that doesn't really exist across the Atlantic. Third, flavor. Because these animals are constantly on the move and eat almost anything, including rotting carcasses, their meat tends to be lean, tough, and carries an off-putting gamey smell that's hard to disguise, a hard sell to American consumers trained for decades on mild, tender, shrink-wrapped protein. Add it all up and you get millions of animals that can't legally be sold, can't easily be eaten, and are too intelligent to be trapped or shot into submission at any meaningful scale. Which brings us back to that hill country clearing in March of 2021, 17 carcasses, each barely touched beyond the neck and shoulder, small unidentified tracks pressed into the dirt around everyone. The lab identified those tracks as belonging to coyotes. Not black bears, not mountain lions, not any of the large predators anyone would naturally assume were capable of taking down a feral hog. Coyotes, animals that typically weigh around 14 kilograms, roughly the size of a mid-sized dog, going up against hogs that can outweigh them sevenfold and come equipped with tusks and hide thick enough to shrug off a bullet. The instinctive response from most of the researchers who saw that identification was pure disbelief. To understand why that reaction was so strong, you need to know how coyotes are actually treated in this country. They are hunted relentlessly. Ranchers despise them for taking chickens and lambs, and state and federal programs spend millions of dollars annually trying to drive their numbers down. Between 2017 and 2020, some states pushed bounty payments as high as $75 per animal killed, and roughly 400,000 coyotes are killed nationwide every single year. And yet, despite constant, well-funded persecution, they haven't just survived. They've spread into 49 of the 50 states, more territory than any other large wild mammal on the continent, thriving equally in city parks and open ranch land. The single most hated, most hunted predator in America turns out to also be one of its most adaptable, and that adaptability is now doing something no government program has managed to pull off. Starting around 2014, biologists running motion-triggered trail cameras through the hill country began pulling footage nobody had anticipated. It wasn't simply coyotes scavenging carcasses that other animals had already killed, which would have been unremarkable. It was coyotes actively hunting as a coordinated unit, splitting up roles and timing their movements with a level of teamwork that scientists had generally assumed was reserved for wolves or lions. Researchers reviewing the earliest clips reportedly went quiet for long stretches, because nothing in the existing literature on coyote behavior had prepared them for what they were watching. Here's what the footage actually shows, described step by step, because the sequence matters. It's roughly 4 in the morning, still pitch dark. 3 coyotes creep toward a hog nest approaching from downwind, a deliberate choice, since hogs have an extraordinary sense of smell, and coming from that angle keeps the coyote's own scent moving away from the nest instead of toward it. They move low and slow, bellies nearly brushing the ground, ears pinned flat, making almost no sound at all, eyes locked on one target, the mother hog, dozing after a long night spent foraging. They don't charge. They wait, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes 20, holding position while the camera keeps recording in the dark. Eventually the sow gets up, roots around near the nest for a moment, then wanders off to keep feeding, putting real distance between herself and her piglets. The instant her back is turned, everything changes. What happens next takes less than 5 seconds. One coyote slips in low and fast along the edge of the nest without a sound, while the other 2 have already spread out to cover different angles, one positioned exactly where a startled piglet would instinctively bolt. A single fast strike to the neck ends it cleanly, and both animals vanish back into the darkness before the mother hog even registers what happened. By the time she returns, there's nothing left to protect. That footage showed the behavior, but separate research confirmed just how widespread it is. At Fort Hood, biologists examined the stomach contents of 18 captured coyotes and found that roughly a third contained fresh, undigested piglet remains rather than old, scavenged meat, direct evidence of active predation, not opportunistic scavenging. In Georgia, wildlife officials tested more than 200 coyote scat samples collected over several years and found pig DNA present in over 30% of them, a share that climbed steadily between 2015 and 2023. In other words, this isn't a rare or accidental behavior. Coyotes are deliberately targeting the next generation of hogs, removing piglets before they ever get old enough to reproduce. What might be even more striking than the behavior itself is the timing of when it appeared. Before roughly 2010, there's almost no documented case of coyotes hunting feral hogs this way. It isn't hardwired instinct passed down for generations, it's a learned technique, one that spread through populations and got refined over time. Ecologists point to two pressures converging at once. Traditional coyote prey like rabbits, rodents, and ground-nesting birds had declined sharply in many areas, right as an enormous, largely untapped protein source, millions of hog piglets born every single year, sat essentially unguarded. Scarcity breeds innovation, and one small behavioral shift makes that especially clear. Coyotes have started favoring dawn hunts over their traditional nighttime patterns, timing their attacks for exactly when sows are most worn out after a full night of foraging. They didn't just figure out what to hunt, they figured out precisely when to strike. That kind of behavioral flexibility is rare in the wild, and it's producing results that no government eradication campaign has come close to matching. The trail cameras have documented it, the stomach content data has confirmed it, the scat analysis has quantified it. Coyotes are hunting feral hogs with more consistency and strategy than any tool humans have thrown at the problem. The real question isn't whether it's happening anymore, it's how far the impact actually reaches, and why we keep working against it. In East Texas, more than 30% of feral hog piglets vanish before the end of a given season, and that mortality tracks most closely with coyote density, not with trapping effort or hunting pressure. In parts of Oklahoma and Georgia, local hog populations have fallen by roughly 20% without a single bullet fired, trap set, or public dollar spent. A healthy, undisturbed coyote population is achieving what billions in government spending has failed to accomplish, and doing it for free. Here's where the situation turns genuinely absurd. Wildlife Services, the federal program tasked with predator control, spends millions of dollars every year killing coyotes in agricultural regions using traps, poison, rifles, and aerial gunning. The downstream effect has been documented clearly. In one Texas county, after the local coyote population dropped by more than 60%, the feral hog population in that same area tripled within 3 years. Remove the predator, and hogs flood right back in to fill the space. It would be easy to call this simple short-sightedness, but the reality is more tangled than that. Livestock and poultry producers do suffer genuine losses to coyotes, and their frustration is legitimate, and that industry carries real political weight with lawmakers. But the math doesn't really support the current approach. Coyote-related losses run into the millions, while feral hog damage runs into the billions. And right now, coyotes represent the only natural check that's producing measurable results at scale. Current policy is effectively protecting one industry's smaller losses while quietly dismantling the best natural defense available against a far larger threat. And every night that debate continues, feral hogs keep reproducing on schedule, indifferent to any of it. What those game wardens stumbled onto that March morning wasn't a crime scene. It was an ecosystem correcting itself. For decades, the human strategy here has followed one script. More traps, more firepower, more funding, and every year the outcome barely moves. More hogs, more damage, a problem that never actually shrinks. Coyotes aren't playing by that script. They don't need a budget line item, a permit, or a performance review. They simply adapted, and in doing so, they've quietly turned into one of the most effective allies this country has in a fight it's been losing for years. The lesson here reaches well past hogs and coyotes specifically. Pull one thread out of an ecosystem, and the cost never stops at that single thread. It ripples outward in ways that take years to even notice. Sometimes the fix was already sitting in the landscape the entire time, and the only thing standing in the way was our own instinct to keep fighting it. So here's the question worth sitting with. Why does public money keep flowing toward killing the one predator that's actually working? Is it lobbying pressure from agricultural interests? Bureaucratic momentum that's hard to redirect once it's funded? Or is there something else going on that we still don't fully understand?